Welcome back to TimeXtender Tuesdays. Today, I'm going to be showing you all the incredible new features in TimeXtender's November release, featuring end-to-end Microsoft Fabric integration with Fabric databases, the exciting public preview of Lakehouse support, an all-new D365 Finance Adapter, and some seriously cool orchestration capabilities. Let's dive right in. First, let's get an overview of this month's release. First up, we have full support for Microsoft Fabric SQL databases. Then we have a public preview of the support for Fabric Lakehouses. This is where the prepare instance will be creating those Parquet files. Next is the all-new Dynamics 365 Finance Adapter, which supports the Azure Synapse link ingestion of Dynamics 365 data. We have two new data sources here, which is the Parquet file data source and the OData data source that have been added to TimeXtender data integration. We've also redesigned the metadata synchronization and table selection for data sources in data integration as well, which I'll be showing. We've also improved how instances are managed in the TimeXtender portal. Now in orchestration, we have improved orchestration of TDI tasks and execution packages. Now all of your packages will automatically be synchronized within orchestration, and you can create those automatically. Local time zone configuration in orchestration as well. I'll show you how to set that up. And finally, cloud cost optimization. We have a new package in orchestration that allows you to scale up and scale down Azure resources, all within your process orchestration management. Let's dive right into our support for Microsoft Fabric SQL databases. So there's a few things that you're going to need to configure in order to get this to work. So we'll walk through that whole process right here. But first of all, I wanted to show you the overview diagram of what this solution looks like. Essentially, you can have your ingest instance on a Lakehouse. And this, of course, is those Parquet files created in OneLake. You'll have your prepare instance, and you'll use the SQL database target. And then we'll show you how to get that connection string. So you get your database name and server name from Microsoft Fabric. And then you can have your semantic models in Microsoft Fabric as well. So all the features and functionality that's supported from TimeXtender for Azure SQL databases is also supported in Fabric databases. The other thing to know is that all of the data in a Fabric database automatically mirrors to Parquet files in a Fabric OneLake. So you can actually access those using the OneLake folder Explorer or the OneLake Explorer, and you can find all those Parquet files. That can add some extra functionality to your data integration process. So let's go ahead and let me show you how to set this up. So first of all, you can use the free trial of Fabric if you still have that free trial, but you are going to want to create a Fabric capacity. So you got to create resource, and you go to Fabric and you create a Fabric capacity. Okay. And what this is going to do, of course, is this is going to give you the compute power for using Microsoft Fabric. Now, let me show you what my Fabric capacity looks like here. You can go ahead and change the size of this, and this is going to give you more compute power or compute units, capacity units inside of Microsoft Fabric. And there's the typical price range of the different sizes that you might have here. So once you have that capacity created, you do want to go into Microsoft Fabric, and you can see I do have some things already created. You'll create a workspace, and in your workspace, which I have my workspace open right now, you go to workspace settings, and you go to license info, and this is where you'll select Fabric capacity, and you want to connect your Fabric capacity that you just created there from Azure. In addition to that, you'll of course also want to create an admin user. You'll likely have your own user already be there as an admin as you created the workspace. And another thing we do recommend is to create a service principal in Azure and add that to the workspace as well. So you'll be able to use that to authenticate to the SQL databases from your TimeXtender prepare instance. Okay, so once you've done that, you can go ahead and click on new item and scroll down a little bit, and you should see SQL database preview right here. You click on that, that'll create that SQL database. Very simple. You basically just give it a name, and it'll create that database right in here. So once you have that database created, you want to open that, and then you click on settings, and then you can go here to click on connection strings. And these connection strings, if you want to learn more about exactly where to get those connection strings, in the community, go to the Use Fabric SQL database storage article. And then I show in here some screenshots, and you can see here that connection string is quite long, but you just need the server name and the database name out of there. So you'll copy those out of the connection string, and then you'll be able to paste those into your prepare instance. Okay, so then once you have those connection strings, you go ahead and go to instances, and you add a new instance. I'm going to add a prepare instance here. Give it a name. You want to, of course, select your SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, Again, this is the same Azure SQL database that we know and love, but inside of Fabric. So you just click that option, and this is where you'll paste your server name and your database name, and then you'll have those available. For authentication, you'll want to use Microsoft Entra Service Principal. Password authentication also works, but you'll have to use a non-multi-factor authentication user for that to work properly. So we do recommend the service principal because you'll have multiple users likely logging into this from TimeXtender. Having this more of a service user type of login scenario is just a better practice for that. So click on service principal. You put in your app ID and secret that you'll get there for your service principal, and then you go ahead and click create, and that'll create that instance for you. So let's go ahead and show you what that looks like in TimeXtender. Let me open up TimeXtender here. Once you do have that, of course, you want to click refresh, and that'll have your Fabric database instance show up there. And once that's open, you can go to edit the instance, and then you can test connection to the storage. So that'll make sure you put in the right server name and database name, and you can get right in there and connect to that database. Once you have that done, go ahead and click OK. And then here we can, in our ODX, this is a Fabric OneLake ODX, by the way, go in and grab some tables. I'll do product category, product model, do a few more here, and you simply drag and drop those, of course, just like usual. And then we have our tables in there, and then you can right click on that and deploy and execute and go ahead and hit start. Of course, you can set up your schemas, set up everything just like you normally would in TimeXtender. And we've done some testing on this. Everything so far is supported as far as we can tell. If you notice any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out. So deployment and execution completed, worked pretty quick. A couple tips that you will want to know when working with the SQL databases or just working with Fabric in general. The region does matter. So the region that you create your Fabric capacity in is important. You want to try to make sure that data is in the same region. Wherever TimeXtender is installed should be in a region geographically close to where you have your Fabric capacity region. It also has to do with the overload. So some of the Azure data centers are getting a lot of Fabric usage and they're becoming overloaded. So the speed is slower. So if you're finding that one region isn't great, try another region and see if you get better performance out of that. I do want to mention one other issue that we did find. When loading from a Fabric Lakehouse that you created, the runtime version does matter. So if you're running 1.2, which is, I think that's the default version when you set up your workspace, 1.2 is going to work great. So you want to make sure that in your ingest instance, all those Parquet files get created using the runtime version 1.2. Okay, let's move on. The next topic we're going to cover here is deploying the prepare instance on the Fabric Lakehouse. The architecture that you'll have is the ingest instance on Lakehouse, which you've already seen. That was available on the last release. And then now with the prepare instance on Lakehouse as well. So what this is going to allow is when you deploy and execute tables, it'll create Parquet files using a Spark notebook. So we will deploy those Spark notebooks there in Fabric, and then generate all the Parquet tables. It'll be loading the data, of course, from the Lakehouse directly using Spark directly in Fabric into the Lakehouse. Now, a few things about this public preview. Right now, it's simple mode only, right? So there's no transformations, no lookups, things like that, but you will be able to create those tables. You will, however, be able to create custom views using T-SQL. So these views will get created on the SQL endpoint of the Lakehouse. So you'll be able to code in custom SQL, create and generate some views, and then map those views into a Fabric semantic model, fully end-to-end in Microsoft Fabric. So let me show you how that works. So when creating a prepare instance for the Fabric Lakehouse, we actually want to start in the TimeXtender portal. We're going to create that prepare instance first, and then we can actually create the Lakehouse from TimeXtender. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we go to our instances page, add a new instance, and add a prepare instance. We'll just call this Lakehouse, select an environment, and then in this dropdown, you want to select Microsoft Fabric Storage. You want to put your workspace name, your Lakehouse name, and this is, again, the name of the Lakehouse that you're going to create. So you want to make sure there isn't a Lakehouse already with the same name. So for this public preview of Lakehouse, it does require both a username password and a service principal. Both the service principal and the username and password need to have admin access to your workspace. And this is because of some current limitations with the Fabric API. So I think they're sorting some of this out, so we'll likely see this go away in future versions of this feature. Once you have all of this information inserted, go ahead and hit save, and that's going to create that prepare instance. So once we have that created, let's go ahead into TimeXtender. Go ahead and, of course, refresh your instances there. And then you'll see your Fabric Lakehouse, your new instance that you just created. Go ahead and open that instance, right-click and click Edit Instance. And then you can click Create Storage. So once you click Create Storage, you do want to select Use Lakehouse Schemas. This will enable you to have schemas just like you have in a typical Prepare instance, and you can have all of the typical schema setups that you would see in TimeXtender. So you go ahead and click OK, and that will create that Lakehouse in your Fabric workspace. Navigating back to Microsoft Fabric, we can see here my Ingest Lakehouse, and then I also have my Prepare Lakehouse. So once you've created that, your Prepare Lakehouse will show up. So once you've created that Lakehouse, you go into TimeXtender. You can go ahead and select some data. Let me search through my ingest instance here. And again, I'll just select some tables. Go ahead and drag and drop those in, and you can expand and you'll see your tables added right in here. Now, it's important to note changes to how deployment and execution worked. So when you're deploying, TimeXtender will create the notebooks. And then when you execute, TimeXtender will create the tables and the Parquet files, and of course, load those with data all as part of one operation. So let's see how that looks. Go ahead and right click on your Lakehouse and then deploy and execute. Okay, so TimeXtender is going to go through, it's going to build those Spark notebooks, and it's going to create those notebooks in your Fabric workspace. So let's go ahead and see what those look like. So we have the operation notebook. And this is what goes through all of the transformations, data cleansing, incremental load, things like that. And then there's the execution notebook. The execution notebook sets some parameters. Again, things like in the ingest instance, you're going to have in terms of incremental load, you're going to have some parameters there that tell it like what batch to use and all of these things. So the parameters are set in the execution notebook, and then you'll see the operation notebook here. So we can take a look at what that looks like. So for example, let's take a look at the person table. So here's that notebook that TimeXtender creates for the person table, right? So it's creating that table, handling incremental load. You see the _I table there. And then again, going through loading all that data, defining the DWID, the DW batch ID, source code, and so on and so forth. Once we've seen that, we can look at the execution notebook for the same table. So let's open that up. Here's the execution notebook. And you can see this one is what it's doing is essentially asking Fabric to run that other notebook, right? So it's pointing to that other notebook and it's going to say run that notebook. And then it goes through and defines a lot of these parameters, right? Great. So one thing that you do want to be aware of when you're using this for the first time, if you're not familiar with what it's like to work in a Spark environment, when you go to execute these tables, there is about a 4-minute delay for Fabric to go and find those resources, spin up those Spark nodes, and then get those able to run. But once they're spun up, that process usually happens pretty quickly. In Microsoft Fabric, you can go to the monitor option here, click on monitor, and you can actually look at these different objects as they're running here, right? So we see, for example, that execute notebook for sales order, and we can see that running here in Fabric. I've noticed that item snapshots has a lot of good insight. If you do run into a failure or an issue, you can go into item snapshots. Looks like it's not quite visible yet because the execution is still running, but this will show at what point in the notebook an issue occurred, and you can go in and see the error information under item snapshots. So that's a nice place to look for there. So once you have deployed and executed, you can go in and you can see in your Prepare Lakehouse these Delta Parquet files that are being created here. Again, that's simply moving the data from that ingest Lakehouse, creating those tables there in the Prepare Lakehouse, doing some data cleansing, making sure it's going through and eliminating those duplicate primary keys, as well as handling incremental load for you. So one other thing I wanted to show here was how you deploy to Fabric semantic models. So just like with the Power BI Premium endpoint, you're going to go to your Deliver instance and edit that and make sure you do have a Power BI endpoint there. And the only thing that's different here is the server name and where you get that server name. So you're going to get that server name in this case from Fabric. And essentially in your Fabric workspace here, you go to Workspace Settings, and under License Info, you scroll down and you see that connection link. And that's that server name there. So you simply copy and paste that into the Power BI server name here, save that, and you'll be able to deploy and execute those models just like you did with Power BI Premium. Now, moving on to the new Dynamics 365 Finance Adapter. Microsoft recently announced the deprecation of the F&O export to data lake functionality. But that creates a lot of challenges for all of the previous users of the export to data lake. Now, this new adapter addresses those challenges by allowing you to connect to the new Azure Synapse Link data in Fabric OneLake, and then, of course, ingest those directly into a Fabric Lakehouse. Now, this does eliminate a lot of the redundant storage by skipping the ingest storage. Of course, with this adapter, you can filter out companies and automatically apply option labels on every table. Let me show you a little bit more about how this works. In the diagram on the left, you can see the Dynamics 365 Finance application. When you configure the Dataverse link, it'll create a near real-time constant sync of this data into Delta Parquet files in an Azure data lake. Now you can create a shortcut in Fabric to give you direct access to this data within Fabric OneLake. Now, when you use the Dynamics 365 Finance Adapter, TimeXtender synchronizes with this data, but it doesn't move it into the ingest storage. You simply map that into the prepare storage, just like you would a traditional data source. And then when you execute, TimeXtender is going to skip the ingest storage and move those Parquet files directly into the prepare storage. Let me show you how to set this up. Okay, in the TimeXtender portal, you're going to want to navigate to Data Source Connections and click on Add a Data Source Connection. We're going to go in here to Dynamics, and you see this Dynamics Finance here. And this is TimeXtender Dynamics 365 Finance. There are different versions of this. So this is if your D365, of course, is on a SQL server, you'd want to use that option. However, this one is the TimeXtender OneLake Finance and Operations Data Source. So we go ahead and click on that one, and then you'll input some settings here. And you put the tenant app and secret here for a service principal that is connected to your workspace, just like when we set up the Lakehouse. Of course, you need to put in the workspace name and Lakehouse name of the Lakehouse that you've created your shortcut in. And I'll show you what that looks like in Fabric in just a second. This is the execution Lakehouse. So TimeXtender, as I mentioned, will create that notebook to move that data over. You can create and run that notebook either in your prepare Lakehouse, or it'll just run on the data source Lakehouse. And then, of course, as similar to the prepare instance, you do need a username and password as well on this data source too. So in this data source, you put a list of companies in here, one item per line. So you put the name of a company, go to the next line, put the name of another company that you want to include. And this will filter out all of the data based on the companies that you list here. Of course, you do need to put the name of your company table in here. It's important to note that if you are using schemas on your F&O Lakehouse, where you have the shortcuts, you will need to put the schema name and a period to define that schema name, make sure it can find the right table there. And then the options behavior. This data source also supports bringing in option labels from all of your different option tables. You want to be sure, again, put the name of the table that includes all of your option labels in there. And then you can click this option to apply option labels on tables. And this is really nice because it's actually going to bring those option labels already onto your tables, so you don't have to do all those lookups. So it's just going to bring those option labels in there for you and reduce a lot of that workload. So let's go into Fabric and I'll show you how to set that up. So in your Fabric workspace here, what you want to do is you want to create an empty Lakehouse. Okay, so you go to New Item and you scroll down, you find Lakehouse, and then you go ahead and create that Lakehouse. And then once you have your Lakehouse created, under Tables, you click on the little three dots there and you click New Shortcut. And you want to select an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 shortcut and select a connection, or you can create a new connection. And what you want to do is you're going to want to point to the container of where you have your Azure Synapse link pointed to. So all of those Delta Parquet files are going to be created by Azure Synapse Link into this data lake storage, and then you're creating a shortcut to all of those tables. So once you do that, you create that shortcut and you'll select all of the tables that you want to bring in. Now, it is important that you do select those tables individually. You can't just select the Delta Lake folder because it'll create another folder and then you won't be able to connect to that. So you will need to go through and select all of those tables individually when you are setting up your shortcut. But when you do set them up, you do need to make sure you have your data area table in here. That's important. And then of course your global options metadata table as well. So those two tables are required for this adapter to work. And then all of the rest of them, you just bring in whatever tables that you want. Now, in TimeXtender, again, you're going to want to run this import metadata task. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then you go in and you go to Metadata Manager. You select all the tables that you want to bring in. You will notice that when you execute a full load, and you'll see this completed with warnings. And that's because all tables are virtual, nothing will be executed. So it's not actually going to be moving any data into that ingest storage. So now we can go into the table selection and pick out what you want, custom table, for example. You drag and drop that over onto tables. And then when you go to deploy and execute these tables, TimeXtender is going to generate the notebooks to pull the data directly from the data source Lakehouse, right? And pull that data right into the prepare Lakehouse. Let me show you what that looks like. So if we go into Fabric, we'll actually be able to take a look at this notebook and see exactly where this data is coming from. So here's the data area table, for example. And if we scroll through this just a little bit, we'll be able to find the table selection. So here we go. So this is coming from, you can see Fabric One Lake. So this is my workspace name, right? And then this is that FO export 2. So that's the Lakehouse where my data source is. So it's actually pulling this data directly from the data source and moving that into the prepare Lakehouse. Okay, so another feature I'm really excited about is the new Metadata Manager. Not only does this allow for improved table and field selection, it will intelligently remap new data sources into the ingest instance. So a common problem that we would see in previous versions is when you'd either upgrade a provider, or let's say you changed a server for your data source, you moved the data source to another server and you just wanted to map to the new server. Well, a common problem that we would see is when you go to synchronize, TimeXtender would recognize that data as all new data, and you would have to fully reload that data source instead of being able to map to all of your existing data and continue loading from where you left off. So this new Metadata Manager helps solve that challenge by automatically remapping these tables to where they were previously mapped to in the ingest instance. So one of the ways that it does that is it actually separated the metadata import process with the synchronization process. So you'll notice now there's a significant change in the workflow for when you're synchronizing your data sources. And we'll walk into that right now here in TimeXtender. So in the TimeXtender user interface, you'll see here in your ingest instance, you have your different data sources. And what you would see before is this little blue checkbox here. This blue task was called a synchronization task. And you'd right click that and it would synchronize with the data source. And if it noticed maybe a slightly different table name, or maybe you changed providers and there was just underscores where there used to be spaces, you would have to recreate those tables from scratch, and you'd have to remap those tables manually back into your prepare instance. And this Metadata Manager helps solve that. One of the ways it does that is by separating the metadata import task. So this is no longer a synchronization task here. This is a metadata import task. So I'm going to go ahead and execute an import metadata task on this data source here on my Dynamics 365 data source. So again, this is going to reach out to the source data, and it's going to pull in table names, field names, and data types, and try and match that up with the previous version. So this is going to ask me if I want to run the synchronization automatically, and this would open up the Metadata Manager and synchronize. I'm going to hit no just so I can show you what that looks like manually. So you right click on here on this data source, you click Metadata Manager. This will open the Metadata Manager, and then you click Synchronize Metadata. So if I would have clicked yes, it would have just done those few options for me automatically. So you can see after the synchronization has completed, some changes here. Number one, I have the included checkboxes here. This allows me to select tables to bring in that maybe didn't appear before. You'll also notice the status column. So in the status column here, for example, you can see these two tables have been removed. So it says mapping failed, requires manual remapping. So it could be that a table was renamed. It's not quite sure. It's just not able to find the budget plan line table that was there before. So I could do a manual remapping. If I know that the table's been renamed to something else, I can do that by clicking on the table and clicking edit. So in here, I'm able to go in and find, okay, is there a different table that actually fulfills this? In this case, it's not. The table was just removed, but I could go in and select a different table and map that in. The important thing to know is that if table names get changed with just maybe an underscore or a space or some sort of delimiter, a lot of those will be handled automatically. So they'll be automatically remapped to the new table name. It'll notify you. It'll let you know what's going on and what's going to happen. So you'll be able to see those changes here in line. But a lot of those changes will get notified automatically. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Some other things is you can filter, right? So I can filter on tables that only have conflicts. As you can see here, these do have conflicts. You can see all the fields that have been removed. We can go in. The interface here is very similar to the Data Explorer that we used to have, where you can go in and see the field names, the table names, the primary keys, and match all of that up. So we can easily filter and go through which tables have metadata changes, auto mapping changes, or no changes. In this case, these are all the ones I had selected previously that have no changes. So now that I know that, what I can do is I'm just going to deselect these. I know these have been removed from the source. I'm okay if those get removed because I don't need them anymore. So this is a manual option now, right? When you're saying you're going to remove tables, instead of that being previously an automatic thing that would just apply. And sometimes that could be frustrating if you weren't quite ready to make those changes. So now I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can see here, choose the tables that you would like to commit. And there's different options here. In this case, it's delete. There could be add. There could be modify if there's a different data type. But in this case, delete is not checked by default. So to delete these tables, I do have to check those tables and then click commit. And it's going to say, do you want to commit these changes? And again, because that could be deleting data, could be removing data from your metadata here, causing you to fully reload something. So it is double checking there for you. Go ahead and click yes, and that's going to apply those metadata changes. And then of course you can right click here and run a new load, which is going to reload that data source for you. But again, with this new synchronization and new metadata manager, it is a definite improvement compared to what it was before. And this is really going to help improve if you are upgrading a data source, maybe you're changing a server or you're changing a provider. It's going to allow you to provide that resynchronization without having the need to do full reloads of your data source. And now I want to show a couple of neat improvements that we've made to the portal. We made the text a little bit smaller here, so it makes room for much longer names. And now we have the all new list view. So you click the toggle here and you can view all of your environments in a list instead of in cards. And for some people, I think that can be an improved layout as well. Also in the migration section, we have improved how this is done. So if you want to migrate something, let's say, for example, let's migrate my Fabric databases. You now see these modals that open up. And these modals allow for a lot easier migration. You can define all the mappings, which just creates an improved and a more accurate workflow. And one final change here is the new option here for the grid, which allows you to navigate to the master data management, data quality of products, or unlock orchestration right from this menu here. Also, if you have TimeXtender data governance installed on the same machine, you'll have this option here for TimeXtender orchestration. Okay, with all that being said, I want to dive into some of the great new features to TimeXtender orchestration. We've improved orchestration of TDI tasks, local time zone configuration, and cloud cost optimization. So you can configure this. If you haven't done it already, you need to get your API key from the TimeXtender portal. So you go here to admin, you click on security and permissions, and you create an API key, give it a name, and you'll be able to copy and paste it right from here. So just call this test for now, generate that API key, but you want to copy that. And then what you can do is you can go into Xmon Turnkey, and then you go up here to settings and you go to data providers, and then you create a data provider, and you want to click on TimeXtender data integration. And here's where you can paste that API key. So you paste that in, and then you want to sync with TDI. And what this will do is this will not only create a lot of packages for each of your ingest tasks, as well as your prepare execution packages and deliver execution packages. It'll create packages inside of XMON orchestration for all of those. So let's look at TimeXtender just one last time and show you what I mean by that. So every transfer task that you have here will create a package. Any execution packages in your prepare instances and any execution packages in your deliver instances will create a package now automatically in XMON. Now, if you are in the XMON DG desktop, right? So we go into general, we go to data providers, and this is the same process. These will be synced. So if you do it in one, it'll show up in the other, but just so you know how to do it, whether you're in the desktop or in turnkey, and you go ahead and right click and create a new data provider. And again, call this test, put it in a description if you need to, but you change your data source type to TimeXtender data integration. And then of course, again, you just paste your API key in there. I'll show you what mine looks like. And there's mine pasted in, and then you click sync with TDI. So once you sync, this is going to ask you to pick a system. So I'm going to sync this with my system, click OK. And once that's done, you click on packages and expand those. And then you can see all of your different packages listed here. One other really cool feature is it actually automatically creates a process map for me as well. And it splits those up per environment. So you can see I have one here for development and one for production. So we'll go ahead and open up my development process map. And you can see that it gives me an ingest, prepare, deliver, and then all of my sources laid out here as well. So it creates one of these green buttons for every one of the tasks that it finds in my ingest instance. And then here for my prepare instance, these are my different execution packages. So I can choose which of these I want to show in my map. And then of course I can save that and deploy that. And then I can view that directly from the web interface. So I can share this with users and show them the status of my nightly loads, my hourly loads, whatever they are. People can see exactly how things are running, if there was any errors. And we can see that again, all from the web portal, which is going to be really, really nice for users. And now what this means is that all of my packages and tasks are going to be orchestrated directly from within orchestration. And there's not going to be any need for using jobs any longer. Okay. So the ability to now do local time zone. So we're going to go to tools and configuration. And in here, we click on advanced and you can see time zone right here. So we can change this to whatever your local time zone is. And it is important to know that this does support daylight savings time as well. This will update all of the schedules, both in turnkey as well as the desktop interface. So just know that when you make this change, you will see all of those get updated across all of those different areas, whether you're in the web portal or in the desktop interface. Okay, last but not least is the cloud cost optimization package. And I am super excited about this one. This is going to make it really easy to scale up, scale down different resources, pause or turn on your virtual machines. To get this set up, you are going to create a package, but in order for that package to work, you do need to create an Azure connection data provider. So you right click on data providers and click on new and new data provider. So you need to put in that app registration here, app ID and client secret. And this is what's going to authenticate you to your Azure environment. Once you have this Azure connection set up, you go to packages, right click, new package, and you're going to click on Azure Cloud Optimizer. Here we select my data provider, JT Azure connection that I just created. And then we select the resource type. Right now we support stopping and starting virtual machines, as well as scaling Azure SQL databases. Of course, we're going to be adding other resources to this in the near future. So you click on Start Stop Virtual Machine, and you'll be able to list all of the virtual machines that you can access with that service principal. So just know that the service principal used to authenticate needs to have permissions, owner rights to those resources. You click your virtual machine, and then you click whether you want to start, restart, or shut down that virtual machine. Now, also, if you look at Azure SQL databases, you click on the database name here. So you pick your database name, and then you can define your purchasing model, and then your tier, and then the capacity of that database. So you can scale up a database immediately before a process gets executed, scale that database up, run your nightly load, and then you can go ahead and scale that back down again when you're done processing for the nightly load. And this is going to enable you to save a significant amount of money in your Azure cloud costs. Okay, that's it for today, everybody. Thanks so much for watching.